Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to ETHealthworld webinar. To present this webinar, I welcome Professor Ruby Pavankar, President of the Asia Pacific Association of Allergy, Asthma, and Clinical Immunology. She also served as a board of director for World Allergy Organization for 17 years and was the first woman president to head the organization globally. She is currently professor at the Department of Pediatrics, Nippon Medical School, Tokyo, Japan. She has been awarded Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award from the President of India in 2010. She is also highly published and cited for her scientific work. There will be a presentation on the topic followed by a question and answer session wherein you may submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect those and address them during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now I request Professor Ruby Pavankar to start the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and warm greetings from Tokyo, Japan to everyone who's listening on. I give this presentation for the International Women's Day 2019 that will be actually celebrated tomorrow on a very important topic, which is actually bringing gender parity to reality. Gender parity is a very, very important issue, and how do we make it a reality? How far have we reached? What are the challenges? And what is the way forward? When you look at the global population trend, you can see that there are actually over 50% of the population are women. Therefore, the need to play a key role in the socio-economic ethos is absolutely an important aspect for women. So what is gender parity? Well, gender parity is a process of being fair to both genders. It is not about giving preferences, but it's about the process of being fair to both genders. So equal enjoyment of socially valued goods and opportunities and resources and rewards, despite the biological differences that do exist between men and women. Again, when we talk about gender balance, the key important issue here is it is a need of the hour. It truly is the need of the hour. But what else does it comprise? It comprises the right to speak, the right to express, to be heard, to act on an equal platform, to evolve, and to contribute to society to the best of one's ability at all levels. From the woman who lives in the village to the CEOs of corporates or leaders of organizations and governments, it spreads across the different categories and different segments of society. When we look at the global trends of gender parity that I will show you later in the Global Gender Index, the Scandinavian countries actually top the list of countries for gender parity. At the lower end, interestingly, there are several economically advanced countries also, somewhere in between and at the lower end. Awareness and action has been growing over the past decades because there's been a lot of discussion about it. There have been changes that have happened. Implementation of certain laws have helped, and therefore there has been a difference as compared to what was there 50 years back. Yet there is much needed to be achieved. So let's look at what are the areas of gender parity, and let me go through each of these with you. So there are several areas of gender parity. For example, health and related services, reducing the inequality and creating a platform where there is equality in health for all. Education, closing the gap in education at all levels by increasing the opportunities, resources towards, and moving towards equitable education opportunities. Human rights, reducing the harmful or violent practices on the girl child and the woman and ensuring their safety. Environment, making access to clean water, sanitation, and modern energy services to both genders as a priority, making equal opportunities and access to jobs, including equal salaries and support systems for working women, which include appropriate maternity leave, facilities for childcare when the mother is away working, and of course, the facilities for elderly care, because very often it's the woman that's actually taking care of the elderly parents. Public life and decision making. So, equal access to decision making and leadership roles. So, let's look at some of the UN data on these different aspects. And I will not go through each and every item, but just I'd like you to focus on some of the points that I've tried to highlight here. So when you look at populations and families, it clearly shows, as I mentioned before, that more than 50% of the population are women. But when we talk about the international immigrants, only half of these international immigrants are women, but men actually dominate. Child marriage is an issue, but this has declined as compared to several years back. But still, almost half of the women aged between 20 and 24 in South Asia and 1/5 in the sub-Saharan African are actually even below age 18. The average number of children or the births given by women has also declined, and this is seen very much in developed countries, like for example in Japan too. There is a decline in the number of children or births given by women, and this is not because of that they are employed. It's because of the difficulties they have to take for childcare while trying to keep their jobs. So when you look at the proportion of women aged 20 to 24 who married before the ages of 15 or between the ages 15 and 18, and this is data between 2005 and 2012, that's was the latest available, you can see again, as I mentioned before, very clearly that it's South Asia and the sub-Saharan Africa that actually has the highest percentage of younger girls actually getting married between 15 and 18. When you look at health, actually, and you look at the distribution of deaths by major categories, where includes non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases, neonatal conditions and maternal conditions, nutritional deficiency, more or less we can see that most of these parameters are kind of similar and not greatly different, but still a little bit less in women have actually more burden as compared to men. What about education? When we look at education, despite the progress that we see in education, only 1 in 2 children in developing regions receive pre-primary education, as compared to 9 out of 10 in the developed regions. Again, there is a gap in tertiary education. Even if primary education is there, tertiary education is limited. Higher education is limited. The proportion of women graduating in the field of science are much less. Women account only for 30% of those who are in the field of research, and nearly 2/3 of the world's 78 million illiterate adults are actually women. So this again shows that there is a big imparity in education. What about work? Again, globally, about 3/4 of men and only half of women participate in the labor force. The gender gap in participation has actually narrowed in some regions only. Women's unemployment rate remains still much higher than men's in most countries. Women spend an average 3 to 4 hours more than men as work or unpaid work. And therefore, the burden of work is also more. Then over half of the countries offer at least 14 weeks of maternity leave. This is an improvement over what was there in the past. And still, there is a big gap that needs to be actually bridged, to actually narrow the gap to be able to offer this across all the countries globally. And this is just a summary saying how women earn less than their male counterparts. And why is this important? Why is it important for women to be working? I mean, it's a choice. I mean, it's a choice they have, and they should be able to choose whether they want to work or they don't want to work, they want to be a housewife. It's the choice or the right to choose that's most important. When you look at the role of or the importance of having women in jobs, because companies with a female board representation outperform those without women. Businesses who include female in leadership also do better. Organizations with gender diversity also attract and retain the best talent. Because it's all about merit, there should not be any gender differences. It should not be a woman should be prioritized or a man should be prioritized. It should be purely based on merit. But let's look at some of the data that's available. And this is a data which shows that women are good for better performance of organizations. So we look at the average return on equity, where women are actually employed, it's higher, and the TRS overall also is higher. The top quartile companies it's higher where women are employed. And again, organizations with the most gender diversity in their board of directors financially outperform companies with the least. And this is again clearly seen at the bottom quartile and the top quartile. You can really see the difference, the return on sales, the return on equity, and return on investment. So the next important point is power and decision making. The number of female heads of states and of government are also lacking. There is a big gap if you consider the number of males and females in these leadership roles in power and decision making. Women representation is lower in parliaments. Women participation in local government has grown in some countries, yet remains less. And there is a glass ceiling, which you can see in separate corporates, but also in various fields of science and medicine, as we have here too in Japan. So there is a glass ceiling, and this gender parity is absolutely important to get the best talent, to choose the best from the male and choose the best from the female. So just parity and not of uplifting the woman. This is not about uplifting a woman, it is about gender parity. Violence against women. Now, this is another important issue. It is important that both males and females have the right to safety. That's a human right. But very often, there are, regardless of income, age, or education, there is exploitation of women, there are rapes, there is household rapes, there is violence, there is exploitation at work. So several different forms of violence against women, female infanticide, selling women as a business or trafficking. So these are the different issues that need to be really targeted, and there should be strict laws that prevent. And it's not only having the strict laws, but implementation of these strict laws in the most dynamic way so that action is taken immediately and not taking 10 to 15 years, which allows the person who commits the crime to be free, let loose for so many years. And that's not the way forward. Environment. This is very, very important because the environment needs to be also safe and clean. So good clean water, both for men and women, clean water, good sanitation, hygienic conditions are absolutely important. Availability of modern energy services, these are absolutely important. And in order to actually achieve this even further, it's very important to have more representation of women in environmental decision making, which, as you can see as the last bulleted point, it clearly shows in the UN data that women are underrepresented in these environmental decision making. So when you look at this, I know this is a very difficult slide to read, but I'll just highlight some points. When you look at the Global Gender Index, and this is across all the different countries, looking at education, economical parity or economical status of the women, health status of the women, and of course, power and decision making, these 4 different aspects. So when you look at these, for example, the top of the top 5, 4 of the countries are the Scandinavian countries, as I mentioned before. And interestingly, the 4th is actually not a Scandinavian country, but Rwanda. And very interestingly, that they are ranked way up in this global gender index. When you look a little further down, you can see here UK, United Kingdom. Further down, you can see United States. And then you look further down, you can see India out here. And still further down, you can see very strong economic countries like Japan. And of course, at the bottom of it all is Yemen. And even you can find other economically advanced countries way down. And then again, it differs. For example, Japan is quite high in health. In health, it ranks 1. So if you look at this individual different items, you can find that there are differences in the ranking based on their economic or leadership power in decision making or education and employment. So in the Indian scenario, there is definitely a distant gap. We talked about the global scenario, we talked about all the countries, we talked about what are the different aspects of gender parity, but what's the Indian scenario? There's a distinct gap in what is seen at the corporate level, higher educational level, careers, to that at the grassroots. There is no doubt that India stands quite pretty good in opportunities at a corporate level. There are many female heads of corporates and many people in businesses, entrepreneurs, and also in the government. But still, much more needs to be achieved and still more needs to be provided. And that needs to come through basically something that's much more right in the socio-economic ethos or socio-cultural ethos. So what needs to be done at a grassroots level is a dire need to create an environment of gender parity through universal education at schools. I mean, education is a human right. And so universal education should be provided at schools, and the right to learn and understand and be able to make one's own decision, to be able to really relate and think and be able to grow up as an adult and mature with all the knowledge that is available and not deny or deprive the person just because of gender. So the right to learn and express one's voice in society, the essential resources that go with it. A girl child should not be deprived of the right to be educated versus a male child. So such essential resources, also essential resources including healthcare, are very important. Stricter laws, as I mentioned before, against violence and the rapid implementation of these laws to protect women from violence. Increasing the employment opportunities and the support system, both from the family and the societal support, where child care and elderly care is also being taken care of so that the women can work and as well as manage, because they have to multitask. And also the participation in decision making at leadership levels. What are the challenges and issues? Well, the challenges and issues, first of all, is the need to recognize that there is an issue, which often is the problem, because very often we are blinded by the fact that there isn't an issue. The first and foremost thing is for us to recognize that this is gender parity is an issue. And this recognition is not just by the women, but this recognition should be by both men and women, because gender parity is all about men and women together and being considered together without any prioritization to either of the genders. So need to recognize it and then act on it. Then we need to create the will and the needed resources. Women have to multitask, as I already said before, and need to have a good work-life balance. So that's something the women have to really manage. They have to find a way of how to fit in their work and their other aspects of the life in a very good balance and build it into their lifestyle. And of course, this requires good support from their families and the society, as I also mentioned before. The other important aspect, again, as I said right in the beginning when I talked about recognizing the issue, is the need to engage both men and women in partnering in this action. So when we actually recognize it, that's one thing. The next thing is to act on it. And when you act on it, you need to engage both the men and women to come together to act and make this gender parity a reality, because it's not about uplifting women. When we look at some of the advances for gender parity that has happened over the years, I won't go into the details of it, but just highlighting. It was the Beijing Declaration in 1995, the peace agreements, the National Women's Forum, the Millennium Development MDG goals, into the social development law, national policy for the advancement and integrated development of women, institutional framework, Presidential Secretariat for Women, MDG, and sectoral programs linked with gender policy and MDG. So many of these kind of advances have taken place over the years, and that has had its effect, because the gender gap that used to exist has narrowed much as compared to several years back. Say from the gender gap would be like something like 32% on average if you put all the different items together, but it varies in the 4 different items. Just a few examples of women who have been successful or really strived through difficulties to be what they wanted to be, who actually had a dream and made the dream come true. For example, the first 3 women doctors in the world. We are proud to have Anandibai Joshi, who graduated from Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in 1886. Seen here with her is Kei Okami in the center and Tabat Islamabuli in the right. So all of them completed their medical education. And this is way back, so many years back in the 1880s. So it's very, very clear that the will and the dream, despite the difficulties and the challenges they had, they made this happen. And therefore, this is a very, very inspirational point for people like us and for the next generation of women to actually move forward and to come up as strong peers for the future. Here is Elizabeth Blackwell, the first female doctor in USA. And then Dr. Mary Punalukos, the first female Surgeon General of India, trained in UK. And then some other very well-known women in politics or through the charity or as those astronauts or writers and social activists. We have Indira Ghandi. We have Mother Teresa, Kalpana Chawla, and Arundhati Roy. This is, of course, the most powerful women shown in the Forbes. So I'm just showing you the pictures, which include, of course, Merkel and the IMF head. So very important women, powerful women in the world. And this is actually a very important activity initiated by the Prime Minister Abe of Japan. It was his vision, and it still is his vision of empowering women. So world empowerment of women. So what we call, however, as WAW. And this was one of those meetings that he held, symposia, where different people from the society were actually called together, and we were people from the government as well as myself and some others who spoke about the challenges that we as women face in the society in Japan and what we could do to actually make the situation better for women to actually rise in their careers or fulfill their societal dreams. So the big picture is we need to create a strategy. The strategy should have short-term goals like everything else, and then we should have medium-term goals or intermediate goals and long-term goals. And in this way forward, the way I look at it is we need to create an environment of equality incorporated into the socio-cultural ethos to drive the process of gender parity at all levels, from the home to the education, professional, and societal platforms. We need to create the resources with better planning and focus, economic parity and decision-making parity, and reinforcing it into the very system of our society. This involves, of course, advocacy, policy dialogue, health for all, education, safety, mentoring of the future generation, and global partnerships which engage both genders, as I said, men and women. And this is crucial in making gender parity a reality. And I would like to end by a quote from Mahatma Gandhi ji, who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. So we already have a couple of questions. So I'll be taking the first one, and it is, what initiatives are being taken at global level to reduce gender pay gap?
Well, at global level, I mean, the United Nations actually is working with different countries to actually initiate programs for making that gender parity. One of the things, for example, I would say the health sector is WHO has a very, very strict rule within it that they have to employ a certain number of women. But again, that doesn't mean that you just accept any woman. But basically, they have to ensure that women are not excluded from being included in the system in power. So at the level of power or decision making, that's a very important thing. Well, when you talk about education, well, that varies from countries to countries, and it's very difficult to make a common consensus or say that, well, that's the thing that's happening everywhere. But for example, in India, we can see that there's a lot of work trying to reduce female infanticide. The laws are getting stricter against violence. There is more initiatives now by the current government trying to increase the sanitation and clean water for women in the villages. There are many initiatives where women are empowered, like where they are having small-scale industries. They are able to run that. This is happening in Bangladesh also. We know that how women were allowed to start small industries. They were given loans for it. In Japan, well, there's good opportunities for women to be educated, but when it comes to professional positions, there is always still a big gender imparity, and that's something that really is being looked at by the Prime Minister and his team. It's being addressed to a certain extent in the government level, but still has to filter down at professional level. And then again, in many countries, you still find that the incomes are, the salaries are not equal. And there also has been changes. Several countries have made changes in that. Several countries have made maternity leave as for 14 weeks as a compulsory system. So things have been changing, but it still, again, varies from country to country.
Yes, and next question is, do you consider a women image portrayed in social media is a barrier in gender parity?
Women image, what does that women image mean?
So that's a little tricky. Do you consider women image portrayed in social media is a barrier? So I would request the attendee to elaborate on that. By that time, I mean, we can have the next question. Are the policies sufficient enough on reaching the health facilities for women, especially in India?
Can you come again? Are the
So, are the policies
Mm.
sufficient enough on reaching the health facilities for women, especially in India?
Well, I can say that we have advanced a lot. That is for sure. But we are a country of more than 1 billion people, so those are challenges, and it will take a while. It certainly has improved from what the situation was before, and this is due to the work partly by the government and partly a lot by a lot of NGOs that are actually working towards trying to help women in the villages, educate them, because it's not only about providing them free healthcare, it's also about empowering them with the knowledge of disease. This is crucial, and is one of my very important, passionate things. And when I talk about patient safety, which is very important, and awareness of patient safety is actually not that high. Just recently, I was in Delhi, speaking at a conference held by Max Healthcare, under the leadership of people from Max, and also my friend and colleague, Dr. Arti Verma, who actually ran this conference. And the whole aspect of patient safety also indicates that there should be patient education, awareness. And the awareness for the patient or disease comes from the mother. So female health is also not just providing them with facilities for good health, but also providing them with the knowledge to be able to understand when they have disease and what they should do when they have that particular disease, and access to the health.
Yeah. So next question is, you talked about the the work life balance. So what can actually women do in India to have a good work life balance, and obviously get a support from their family?
Well, I would say the situation in India depends on the social class you come from. It's not equal across the different classes. But if you would say for an average educated woman in India, the situation is far better than what it is in Japan, because you have a system of the family support. You have the system of help from maids and help, servants and maids that can help out. So the work-life balance, I would say, is easier in an environment like in India. Whereas in Japan, we do not have. It's very, very difficult to get help. So we manage our work, we manage our homes, we manage everything by ourselves. So for us, we need to actually dedicate our time and divide it in a way that our work doesn't get affected, but we make sure we need to have the right amount of sleep, because you need to sleep to be able to function. We need to exercise to keep ourselves healthy. This is very prime. And we also need to take care of our household activities and children and family. So it depends on the country. And I think in India, the system is pretty good. The only thing is that each person should really lay out a plan that, okay, I have to spend this much time on my work, but I need to spend this much time on my family. I need to spend this much time on exercise. I need to spend this much time on my societal responsibilities. So demarketing or time management, I think, is very crucial. Prioritizing is very crucial. You need to prioritize everything. So prioritizing, time management, and keeping positivity is crucial. And I think that's the core thing at an average educated person. If you're looking at the lower sector of society, again, the challenges are different, because then they are actually taking care of the baby and cooking at the same time. So the child is, inhaling all the biomass, having diseases. The mother doesn't know what to do. She's not aware. So the challenges are different. So to put it all into one casket and say, okay, this is fine, is very difficult. But I do appreciate the work done by several NGOs, like one of my colleagues also from Jaipur, Dr. Meeta Singh, works very hard towards the girl child, and there are many such NGOs actually, of course. And this is crucial because helping the society, uh, I mean the people, the women who in the villages who are unable to or are unaware or do not have the knowledge also is one important aspect. And I think, of course, the government has an important role also to improve upon these policies. Some have already been implemented, but there is still much more to do.
Yes. So we took a question earlier regarding image of women in media, and so we have a detailed, thing on that. So the lady asks, women image like portrayed in movies or advertisements for selling their products, right? This creates a negative environment among the generations. This have its own consequences on gender parity. So do you think these kind of the advertisements or the kind of image that is being portrayed in media is good or bad for gender parity?
Well, I mean, acting in movies and modeling and in advertisements or live modeling is a thing that happens all over the world. So I don't think it's a matter of an issue of gender parity, unless somebody is being forced into something. If it's a forced situation, you're compelled because of your economic situation, you have no resource and you're forced to do something against your will, then it's an issue of gender parity. But if somebody chooses to be a film actress and there's an image of yourself, if somebody chooses to be a model and there's an image of yourself, that's a personal choice. And the whole idea of gender parity is the right to choose. So I do not think the image is bad. It depends on the circumstances in which the image actually appears.
Yes, exactly. It's all about what one rights to choose. I mean, that right to choose thing.
Absolutely.
So the last question we would take is, in 21st century, we see that there are more genders than just male and female. What should one do to help the people from these groups to uplift their economical and social status?
Well, that's a very unrelated question to the current topic. Here we are talking about gender parity of male and female. So I think it's a little bit out of context. But just to address that, I would just say that I don't even know if we have any economic data to compare that what's their economic status compared to men and women. So in the absence of any objective data, or I would refrain from making any comment on it because I need evidence before I make informed comment. And without the evidence that is there, I would refrain from making any comment.
We understand. So with that, we come to an end to today's wonderful presentation. Thank you, Professor Ruby Pavankar, for sharing valuable insights on the topic, bringing gender parity to reality. If you have any other questions, please send them at editor@ethealthworld.com. It was an engaging and insightful talk, and hope all the participants have enjoyed the session. The recording of this webinar will be made available on ethealthworld.com. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Professor Ruby Pavankar.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.